You are listening to an MLGA Network podcast.
Welcome to Thank You for Your Servers, a show which looks at the tech news of today, but from a libertarian perspective. Now here are your hosts, Thaddeus and Gary.
Thank you for logging into Thank You for Your Servers. I am Thaddeus Preston, aka Nick Way, and joining me is my brother from another mother, Gary Guthrie. And this is our almost weekly rant about the tech topics from of the week from a liberty perspective. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing great. How are you?
It's been a heck of a week. Sorry we missed a recording session last week, but between travel and life on both our fronts, things, can get a little hairy. But we're back. Everyone calm down.
We're here. Yes. Yeah, everybody calm down.
Yes.
I can sense the anxiousness.
Yes.
And it's really, don't throw us off. We're really trying hard here. So.
Yeah, right. Remember, give us the 100 episode challenge. If we can make it to 100 episodes, then we'll be golden. This and other podcasts are brought to you by the MLGA, Make Liberty Great Again network of podcasts. And this week, well, I guess the elephant in the room is more Sino panic when it comes to our friends Huawei, right? So here's the story so far when it comes to the Huawei controversy in conjunction with this debacle of a trade war. So on May 15th, the Trump administration added Huawei to the Department of Commerce's entity list. So you may ask, what is the entity list? Well, let me read you some governmentese. As a supplement number 4 to Part 744 of the EAR, the Export Administration Regulations contains a list of names of certain foreign persons, including businesses, research institutions, governments, private organizations, individuals, and other types of legal persons that are subject to specific license requirements for the export, re-export, and transfer in country of specific items. These persons comprise the entity list. Of course, that is part of supplement number 4, part 744. Doesn't that sound like bureaucratese?
I hate when you get into the acronyms and the numbers. It drives me nuts. My niece came home. She just joined and I don't want to badmouth the military here, but she joined the Coast Guard. She comes home and all she does is talk in acronyms. And stuff. And I have to tell her, oh my God, stop it.
As a veteran, I can truly say that it took me at least 4 or 5 years to have beat out of me the use of acronyms. However, when you work for any government contract, even in the civilian side of the house, you have a nasty tendency to use these stupid little acronyms. But more on the entity list here. It specifies the license requirements that it imposes on each of the persons as I described above. These license requirements are independent of and in addition to license requirements imposed elsewhere in the EAR. It gives an example of, if you want to export, re-export, or transfer in country an EAR 99 item to a listed entity. Basically what it's saying here, because this is getting dull and I'm almost falling asleep reading this, in order to continue to license to a person or persons on this entity list, you have to get express government approval. You must go bow and on bended knee to the state so you can sell your products. This started a cascading effect where on May 19th, this triggers Google ending its support for Huawei. So this basically forced Google to publicly say, hey, we're complying with this order that was handed down from the executive branch of the Trump administration via the Commerce Department. They're complying with the order and reviewing its implications. So they're actually working with Huawei behind the scenes to figure out, a way around this, but there isn't many ways around this. All right, for its users of the service, the Google Play and security protection from the Google Play will continue to function on existing Huawei devices. However, going forward, they're going to be unable to really put Google Play services on up and coming Huawei devices, and that includes Honor. If you're not familiar with Honor, Honor is a lower brand of Huawei that doesn't have the Huawei name on it, so it allows them to kind of sell it because Huawei has a really bad tinge in the U.S. market. So this means like there's be going forward no Google Play apps like Map, Search, Assistant, Gmail, etc. on future Huawei phones, and probably going forward no patches and security updates to existing phones. But wait, the saga continues. On May 20th, realizing this, and with some, I would suspect some prompting from Google, Huawei was granted a 90-day reprieve from the Trump administration's Commerce Department. They issued a temporary license that will allow Huawei to maintain its current products for existing customers. This runs out on the 19th of August. And of course, if the trade dispute that is prompting all of this basic economic warfare isn't solved by that 90-day mark, the full force of this ban and its continued listing on the entity lists, again, government lists, will continue. But this is not that bad, right? Because it's already been kind of known that Huawei, particularly in its Chinese markets, wants to kind of move away from using Google as in particular. They can take Android because Android OS essentially is open source. It just, the open source version doesn't have the hooks into the Google services. And truly, the way Google has built Android going forward, without those hooks, Android OS is aight, but it's not great. Do we remember Project Firefly, or was it Firefly from Amazon, who tried to take a stripped down version of Android OS and like put it on like the Fire TV, Fire Sticks, Fire whatever. It was an unmitigated disaster. No one uses those services hardly anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And so but they're working that out. But the other shoe to drop on the 22nd was ARM. If you're not familiar with ARM is a British chip designer that builds and licenses the technology that goes in all the chips that you hold dear. From your Qualcomm Snapdragons to your Samsung's what are those chips called? God, I can't off the top of my head. But there's a chipset that Samsung uses. MediaTek is a Chinese company that uses some of ARM's technology and stuff like that. If it must comply with this ban, that will cut off a major avenue for Huawei to purchase chips going forward. Even for its brand of what they call high-link silicon chips, a lot of the technology is licensed from ARM. So ARM suspends its business dealings with Huawei. The British chip maker ARM told its employees to halt conducting business with Huawei. ARM is complying with all of the latest regulations set forth by the U.S. government. I don't understand how that's possible, because ARM is a British company. But I continue. Huawei later acknowledged the action. We value our close relationship with our partners, but recognize the pressure that some of them are under. This is coming from Huawei. As a result of a politically motivated decision. They're getting a little snippy now because I would too. We are confident that this is a regrettable situation that can be resolved, and our priority remains to continue to deliver work-outs, blah, 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 corporate speak. So ARM is complying with the latest restrictions. This is what ARM is saying, set forth by the U.S. government, and is having ongoing conversations with the appropriate U.S. government agencies to ensure we remain in compliance. So as we kind of move forward, like, why is this important, and why am I sort of up in arms about this? Why have I been on this sinophobic techno-panic, kick? Because this is trade warfare, and it's the beginning of very dangerous precedents. This is economic warfare at the highest levels. This is state actors doing very terrible things to private companies.
When you have a state who can basically tell you exactly what you can do, how you can do it, when and where you can do it. I mean, I don't understand how this isn't a red flag for anyone. I have friends who see this kind of stuff going on and say, well, they're looking out for our best interests. They're protecting us. And it boggles me that people just accept that broadly without even questioning what's really going on. And I think what helps for me, is I will go to one of my statist friends, and I hate to call them statist, but they are, when you just blindly accept something without questioning
absolutely.
it. You have to raise the question. And what I found useful is saying, you sit here and you look at somebody like a Donald Trump and you say they're the most evil person in the world, and they're just absolutely abusing the government, or they're abusing their power, whatever. How much of a stretch of it is to say, okay, there are other people who are just as evil as him, but they're just way better at covering it up and abusing it more quietly.
Yeah, and this is not to say that the regime of communist China is not the most evilest regime the world has ever known, with a technological prowess to enforce their will, i.e., talk to the Uyghurs of Western China. But that doesn't. But I mean, to me, what are we doing about this, right? I mean, we're, as part of the trade negotiations, we're not even pressing that issue, right? We're hurting farmers. We're hurting our tech companies. I mean, this is going to have negative implications for global trade beyond just the tech sector. I mean, the global tech sector is so heavily interconnected with hardware, software, and licensing. IP. I'm starting to realize that maybe IP is not a great thing.
Yep.
I mean, this is potentially. This is a trade debacle. This is designed to hurt the Chinese and to bring them to the negotiating table in these talks, right? But this will backfire, right? Let me put it to you this way. Let's say
it's
this
already backfiring. I mean, we had to already sign in $19.1 billion in aid to people who are suffering, the farmers that are suffering from this already.
Yeah. And God bless the one Republican vote that stopped that from happening. Now, granted, the pressure that we brought to bear against that poor congressman because he wanted his, wall funding or INS funding. But I mean, despite his reasoning, right? Because at the end of the day, if that was his reasoning, it's still a statist tactic. That's, hey, we're going to pay these farmers because of our external policy toward the Chinese government. I mean, but let's say this ends in the next couple months. Is this a good thing, right? No, it won't be a good thing. Because what happens is, who would ever want to do business with the West again if at any arbitrary point they could just put you on a list, government list, and and cause your business to fall? Talk to ZTE, the last Chinese company that was caught in the crossfire of the snippiness between the Chinese government and the Trump administration. Long term, this will close these markets to U.S. and European companies. Why would I use IP encumbered stuff from the West to build my chipsets, or to build or license anything else, if at any point the next time there's a new Sino panic, or in the future if you get a more liberal administration that is actually going to look at what they're doing to the Uyghurs in the West and be like, all right, we're going to put trade restrictions on you just because, you're, repressing people. You've created this kind of authoritarian Orwellian state. You're throwing people in prison camps and stuff like that. Maybe we won't trade with you, or maybe we'll put you back on this list.
I'll tell you right now, I would not.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it.
There's too much at risk, and I'm not going to put my eggs in that basket. Sorry.
Yeah.
If those are the games you're going to play, and this is where the liberty angle comes in, right? Free market, right? I've got a product, and there's demand for this product.
Yeah.
Let me sell it.
Yeah.
You
I'll say this: even if the company you think you're dealing with is evil incarnated, which I don't think Huawei is nearly as involved with the Chinese government as people fear it is. I do understand that at the end of the day, there have been numerous cases over the last decade that's definitely proven that there is a ongoing, slightly clandestine Chinese corporate espionage operation that has its tentacles for which the Communist Party of the state has its tentacles in some of these companies. But at the end of the day, what the interconnected this should actually prove that the interconnectedness of our software, hardware, licensing, and other type of trade stuff makes it very, very difficult for them to like exert that power long term. But
right, and it does kind of self-control through those connected agreements, right? It kind of protects it from full-blown Chinese government ownership, which is the fear, right?
Right.
Which is, for the most part, unfounded. I think the motivation is there, but I don't think the ability is there.
Yeah. If you're going to attack the Chinese government on this issue, on the issues of importance, all right. I mean, add this to the list of other stories where the xenophobic stories about 5G is another example of this. Huawei is intricately involved in that debacle and that kind of, high stakes poker game. But I mean, this is not good for global trade. It's not good for the future of technological progress moving forward. We are very interconnected to the East Asian markets, and
right.
To end on this note, man, where goods and intellectual property are not allowed to cross borders, I think cyber armies will. You're giving them the incentive to employ tactics in the future that you fear they're going to employ if you do this again. And
I didn't even go there in my mind, but you know what? I think you bring up a really good point, right? You're basically saying your only choice now is to cross that line.
Yeah. Dangerous stuff. And yeah, these techno panics, and I mean, when you got your neocons and your new right Republicans and your conservatives and your Democrats and everyone else kind of coming on the same page of wanting to regulate and wanting to become this interfering middleman in the process of free trade. Right. And not even getting, and that's the thing, not even getting the concessions necessary to, hey, how about we stop giving you access to this technology if you stop repressing your Muslim people in the West? We're not even getting those types of concessions. So, yeah.
And we won't.
No, I don't think Here's we will. Deal. That's a dirty little secret. Like, I mean, at least the New York Times is starting to realize this. And, and there've been stories about the Uyghur problem for 5 years, and like the new technical angle to that is they're using all these technologies that I saw last week when it comes to machine learning and AI and big data and surveillance and 5G and wireless technology and stuff like that to suppress people. Maybe we should hold back on our intellectual property and software going to said Chinese companies or companies that are supplying these types of technologies that allow them to suppress millions of people. I don't know. Well, I'm done ranting about that. I'm very upset about that, but I think hopefully we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. It kind of leads me into
it'll be interesting to watch going forward. And my hope with this whole thing is that, hopefully there's an awareness that people are having that maybe motivates people to seek a little further instead of just accepting what they're being fed, because, it's kind of conspiracy theorist sounding, but at the same time, the reality of it is we're being fed crap because, number one, they have to convince the public of what, their legitimacy in putting Huawei on the list or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it generates a lot of unnecessary fear, like, as you're calling it, the Sinopanic, and it's culturally not helpful.
Yes, this is true. Kind of like the Russia panic, right?
Oh yeah.
I was reading a story not too long ago, a couple years ago, where they're at the height of this Russia collusion nonsense about how like Russian like tech workers and stuff were finding a hard time getting VC funding for companies they were co-founding in the Valley. They were having hard times finding work because of their apparent Russian ties and stuff. And it's funny, xenophobia tends to be blamed on the right, when it comes to, cultural issues. But when you look about it from an economic standpoint, the thing where the right and the left have a tendency to agree xenophobically in a xenophobic nature is like trade and
Yeah.
panics. And you've seen it before, and I think we'll see it again. And a lot of the Sino panic and a lot of this that has led to this trade war, which is something that, I mean, let's be blunt, this is what the Trump administration has said it was going to do going forward. The MAGA types cheered it on, not understanding that its implications was going to be dire. And that kind of leads me into this topic number 2 with why Uber's IPO fail, right? Like Uber had a terrible IPO. And
Yep.
they had a terrible IPO on the 10th because these these trade disputes started flaring up around that time, and there was market like volatility at that time, and their IPO price was set and their IPO date was set, and they happened right about the time we started imposing tariffs. They went IPO'd, so they started at 42. They got as low as 36. Now they're kind of back up to like 42, but there's a bigger angle here, right? One, linking back to our previous topic, right, of the Sino panic, and i.e. the trade war, and its detrimental effects on markets, because, markets don't like this type of volatility. Also, to get to the SJW cultural angle, people have been hating on Uber for years. And it's in
Bro culture, right?
Oh yeah, and I think even if these trade talks and this kind of trade war thing was a downward pressure on the market, from a fundamental standpoint, even though the company is losing a tremendous amount of money a quarter, it's so huge. It's become the vocabulary of how one gets around in the urban setting, and
Right.
there've been blogs, mainly tech blogs, who've been talking down the company because of its bro culture. It was kind of as coming after Facebook, it was had more of the Facebook philosophy of move fast and break things. They skirted some of the laws in the respective cities that they launched, which I don't care. I think it's
God
better.
bless them.
Yeah, I think it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Because if you ask for permission, you'll never get you'll never get access. Or at the
It's
very
the new
least, it'll cost
innovation,
you
really.
money. Yeah, this is absolutely true. So I mean, they have their social justice, CEO. Do we dare attempt to try to pronounce his current name? I don't know. I'll say Dara.
Dara something. There you go.
Yeah,
We're on a first name basis.
We're on the
with
first name
CEO of
basis
Uber.
with the tech CEO. He didn't get his $100 million bonus because they didn't reach targets. I don't remember the New York Times article. I will try to find it and put it in the show notes about the immorality of the fact that a company like Uber goes public, when it's just like, do you know that Uber has done more morally, done more from a liberty angle, right? It's done more for people than what, you SJW types will complain about when it comes to their culture and, maybe some, sexual improprieties with some of the board members and, the first CEO being hated because he was kind of a ruthless guy and stuff. And it's just
You're running the risk of doing the boys will be boys thing, right?
I am
throwing
running the
it
risk of the boys will be boys thing, and no, I know that is not an excuse. That is not an excuse. But as I like to say to people, just because it's not an excuse doesn't mean it's not a reason. And so, like, the company is what it is, and it became what it is. And with the departure of the employee number 1 this week, leaving the board of directors, his name is Ryan Graves. They're basically cleaning house and making sure that the company is now ready and poised as a public company. They're kind of jettisoning their kind of past indiscretions. But I mean, people have been gleefully looking at the fact that, like, it could be considered the worst IPO in history because of how bad it performed. But it also ignores the fact that it's been a drumbeat of almost 4 or 5 years of beating down on the company and anything negative about ride sharing in general. Doesn't it almost seem like to you, Gary, that, like, there's the powers that be get access to the corporate press, and like they attach onto a narrative about how bad the gig economy is, one, but ride sharing is in general, and then they found their ultimate like villain in Uber. And like this company's been talked down. Like even when the Uber car wrecked in Phoenix and killed the homeless person who just wandered into the streets, because crazy homeless people do that and they get hit by cars all the time. It's almost like that story keeps, there's that nugget in every story about beating on Uber. And so by the time the company does what it needs to do, it tries to clean house. It hires a CEO who is kinder, gentler, SJW friendly, and says the right things.
Right.
And then they still beat on the company for its past.
Well, I think they're going to, Uber will always be a target, because if you, and I focus a lot, I talk a lot about language and culture. When you have a company whose name has become a verb
Correct.
in the English language.
Yes.
They are going to be the target, whether or not it's, a legitimate concern or whatever. This is going to be a target, and they're going to have to deal with this going forward in perpetuity, because
Yes.
no one says, hey, I'm going to go Lyft to the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, they say I'm going to go Uber to the airport.
Even if they call a Lyft, right? It's kind of like
Exactly.
it's kind of like the Clorox thing, right? Or Kleenex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of them. What is it? There's actually a term for it, and I forgot what it was. I actually saw it the other day. When you look up in the supermarket at the signs up above, it doesn't say flavored gelatin. It says Jello.
Yes.
And oh God, now this is bothering me.
Yeah, no.
There's an actual phenomenon for it. Coke.
Yeah,
that's
Coke.
another big one.
Yeah, Coke. Yeah, right. Like, depending on the region of the country, you either call it Coke.
And back in the day, IBM. I'm going to go buy an IBM. Nobody says that now, but
yeah, absolutely. Or a PC, right? Personal computer, right? Because that's where the term came from. It came from IBM personal computer, and PC correct. Became synonymous with Windows-based personal computers. And there's tons of examples of it. I just think Uber will ultimately be it will ultimately have a market capitalization just as equal as Amazon and Facebook and whatever.
I believe so.
It will be a huge company. They can drum up all support about the driver, because they do this with Amazon now, about drivers and. Uh-oh. Shut up, Google! Don't you hate that? That's bad for radio. When Google Assistant starts yelling at you, because it hurt its name. But
it's the new normal.
It's the new normal. That and Alexa. We used to cuss Alexa out all the time. But but you hear this all the time where like the big dog, right? Like I even start to see stories about like how some of these tech companies hire contractors for some of their like lower level coding tasks and unit tests and stuff. And they're yep. separate from the actual be it Apple employees or Google employees and stuff like that. And now we need this avenue for that has been going on for decades of contractor first, then hire on to the main company second. Now that's under assault, because in tech, it seems tech writers have been conditioned over the last decade to not like big and to not like
right.
dominant players, and to espouse motives to these dominant players that are nefarious all the time. And they don't understand that like you're feeding into this culture and stuff like that, where where companies are afraid to go big, be aggressive. And here's a dirty little secret, and just this is kind of circle back around to like our first story. Do you think if Chinese companies are ultimately given easier access to our markets, do you think you're going to come in with your values? Do you think they're going to come in, they're going to care if, Huawei's chip manufacturers are like, chip manufacturing arm has slave labor in like Bangladesh and shit? Like, they're not going to care about that, right?
No.
You almost hobble tech companies now, where I fear that because of all this SJW BS, this hatred of bigness, this now we must go on bended knee to DC or Sacramento or Santa Fe or Austin or Denver for permission to operate in the meat space, MEAT space, as or human space. You're
Right.
going to, are we going to get future Ubers? Are we going to get future Googles? Are we going to get future Facebooks?
I don't know. It's really hard because if you look at the ones, the Ubers, the Facebooks, the Googles, really their big growth and their bigness is based on almost a cultural shift, really. And how often do those come along? Well, recently maybe they've been coming along more than before because we've embraced technology more, and things have gotten smaller and more accessible. But I don't know that I don't know. I don't see the next big shift coming, and if I did, I would invest in it with every dollar I had. But I don't know. It's the future is getting harder to predict, I think.
Yeah, I think the best prediction for a future that can be predicted is disruption. And this disruption will bring good and will bring bad. I look forward to it, but these growing pains, man, they're so disgusting. And like Uber is just kind of, it's this thing that just goats me, right? I mean, now Amazon's the villain where before it was Walmart, and then Google's the villain where before it was Microsoft, and it's just mind numbing. And
I think if you're going to go big, that's just part of the game because you're going to be a target, like we talked about. It's just part and parcel of that position in the marketplace, and there's no getting around it. It doesn't matter how innocent you are, someone's going to find something to villainize you for.
Even if Uber has created more jobs, stopped more DUIs, probably brought down more carbon emissions by its very existence.
but they have a poster of Farrah Fawcett on their wall or something. Now they're the most evil person in the world. I know, at some point you have to accept that people are human beings, and there's going to be an element of disgustingness because humans are disgusting, and it's a balancing act. How far do you really go? I have to question, some of these tech writers who are going on the social justice warpath, and how much of it is just to get themselves market share in the media space.
That's an excellent point. I think a lot of it is. I think most of it is, particularly when the Ubers first started getting the ire of the tech press. What's her name? It was a tech blogger who left TechCrunch and started her own thing, Sarah Lacey, I think. And her big claim to fame was going after Uber, and then Uber then subsequently going after her, and then her playing the victim. I forgot.
Right.
She was actually a very smart tech writer and actually got it, but like went straight social justice and feminist victim card. And you saw it, and it gave her organization at the time, I forgot what it was called, I won't even give it shine, a lot of tech press, because I followed her on Twitter because she was very smart and insightful, particularly when it came to like H-1B visas, tech and entrepreneurship. But yeah, something happens. The culture broke a lot of tech writers, and I think what it is they were following this trend of social justice warfare, and you get shine from it, and it's kind of disgusting, and not to too much belabor the point.
It's totally disgusting.
Yeah, it's gross. It's gross. I'm already getting sick to my stomach, and it's not for all the barbecue and like sweets I ate last week. All right, so I think we'll probably wrap it up on the final topic here of like the Supreme Court rules that you can now sue Apple. This is kind of old, but I found it very, very interesting because there might be a silver lining to this. And again, it's one of these real deep stories where you have to get into the minutia of it. And I'm sorry for the audience if I geek out on this. So the case was called like Apple versus Pepper. And it dealt with the issue of whether or not like Apple's 30% revenue cut is a charge that trickles down to consumers, given that the App Store is a monopoly, meaning there's really no other way to legally get an app on the iPhone, which if you're tech savvy, we all know you can.
You can figure it out, yeah.
The plaintiffs argue that the size of the cut necessitated app developers to set higher prices to offset it. That's kind of how economics works, right? I mean, to me, it makes sense.
Supply and demand, yeah.
Yeah, they're passing on a 30%. So respondents for Apple iPhone owners sued Apple, alleging that the company has unlawfully monopolized the aftermarket for the iPhone apps, essentially saying that since the App Store is the only place you can legally get iOS apps, that makes this makes the App Store a monopoly that forces developers to charge 30% premium for their apps. That is passed on to consumers and hence not fair. If you followed that logic, it's not logical, but if you followed it, that's basically saying
it's not logical because, first of all, I don't consider this a monopoly at all because any iPhone user can ditch Apple and go get an Android phone.
Correct.
You know, I don't understand the underlying assumption that I have to have an iPhone. You know, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, so the United States Supreme Court ruled this week, or really it was 2 weeks ago at this point, that users could sue Apple for allegedly monopolizing the App Store and driving up the price of apps because of the 30% premium. It's nothing more. It's like me complaining to the local Valero gas station here that, hey, Valero's passing on the gas tax to me, but I'm not going to like bitch at Valero about this. I'm going to bitch at like New Mexico. You know, state highway department, right? So I'm gonna go sue those guys because you charge a tax, which makes Valero pass that tax on to me, and that's not fair. The logic still holds, you know, right? So right, because you know, New Mexico Department of Transportation has a monopoly on the roads, right? Roads, right, as we like to say.
Right. Mo roads.
Okay, so this means users can sue Apple directly for the cost of the apps where developers are forced to distribute their respective apps and to get 30% of the app sales for the privilege. But there's a silver lining to this statism. If you can sue the App Store, then maybe, just maybe, this opens up the floodgates to more frivolous lawsuits that will ultimately chip away at the Apple App Store monopoly and app distribution for iOS in its pricing model. So, I mean, they might drop to 30% someday. Also, this is the silver lining for me, even though this decision was garbage. And we'll discuss that in a sec. They may also leave Apple and other app stores exposed to other areas of antitrust, most notably free speech, hate speech rules, excluding apps such as Gab. So basically what that means is, so Gab may have standing to sue. It's a slivet, right? Because this case was very specific, but it will allow these to go forward. Gab could sue them like, hey, we can't get into the App Store. Like, you have gotten, you monopolize a distribution channel for us to access people with iPhones. You kicked our app off because of free speech, hate speech reasons. And if you actually kind of follow and trace the history of Gab, it's been this cat and mouse thing where, like, it's been very, very arbitrary from the Google App Store to the iOS App Store about how and why they kick Gab off. Love or hate Gab for the community that it corrals, and there's some despicable individuals on there, but that's beside the point. If you can now sue Apple in the App Store, that you could probably sue other app stores and say, like, hey, not only is the 30% premium you're charging us fair to get access to essentially our customers, but via your platform, but like, why are you denying us access to our customers, i.e. via your platform? There could be a way. Yeah. So there's no real liberty angle to this because, it's antitrust law, it's Byzantine, it's stupid. And it's kind of and it's anti-property rights from the perspective of Apple and this. So our homeboy, party down Kavanaugh, delivered the opinion of the court, which was basically, for this ruling. I mean, he joined Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan. Go figure. Gorsuch, who thank God for Gorsuch. I mean, if Trump does nothing else for his presidency, appointing that guy to the Supreme Court has been like a win. So in the dissenting opinion, let me read this terribly, and please forgive my public school education inability to read out loud. The key takeaways as to why this ruling was stupid is in the opening paragraph of the dissent written by our boy Gorsuch. More than 40 years ago, in Illinois Brick Company versus Illinois 431 U.S. Code 17. God, I hate that.
Blah, 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 blah.
This court held that an antitrust plaintiff can't sue a defendant for overcharging someone else who might or might not have passed on all or some of the overcharges to him. Basically what we were saying. Like, this was dumb.
Right.
The Illinois Brick held that these convoluted pass-on theories of damages violates traditional principles of proximate causation, i.e. proximity, right? So you shouldn't be suing the app store. You should be suing the app developer.
Correct.
And that the right plaintiff to bring suit is the one on whom the overcharging immediately and surely fell, what I just described. In other words, the standing should be with the developers in the App Store, not the consumer for whom the prices are passed on to. So the app developers should sue the App Store. Or the buyer of the app should sue the app developer.
The developer. Right.
So you sit back and you look at this and you're just like, how the hell is this a ruling?
Well, but I think that goes I think that goes back to, again, the target is going to be the bigger player. No one's going to go sue Gary's development studio for passing on a 30% fee or whatever to a consumer, because it's small potatoes. Nothing going to happen, and no one's going to make a stink about it. Everyone's going to ignore it. We're going after the App Store.
Correct.
Okay.
This is, I guess you're right. I mean, it goes back to the Uber story, right? Like, it's this war on bigness.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't even know if it's a war on bigness so much as just a targeting of bigness, because that's how you're going to get the attention.
Yeah. Agreed.
It becomes a war, I guess, but it's kind of gross to me that people can't see proper causation. They can't get through the fact that, that they're being fed a line about the evils of how big Apple is. Well, it's a time we educate ourselves.
Right. I can hate Apple because of its political positions that as a corporate culture it holds, maybe some of its practices in the past, particularly when it comes to the App Store. But understand that, like, it is well within their right to do so.
Absolutely. And if they choose to do so, I can choose not to do business with them. Go for it.
And I think this decision does weaponize the lawfare state against Google and Apple when it comes particularly to their app stores. I don't like it. I think the decision is stupid. But putting my free speech absolutist hat on, this does open up an avenue for apps that have been discriminated against in these respective app stores, that's Google and Apple's, to maybe have some
there's a silver lining to be found.
Yeah, that's a sliver of a silver lining. I mean, I stretched really hard for that one. I don't even know if it's true. But I mean, the simple fact of the matter is it does open up the floodgates to a lot of lawfare. I think going forward, the 30% premium may eventually start to be lowered. I don't think it will ever go away, because running app stores are very expensive.
Sure.
From an infrastructure standpoint, security standpoint, all that stuff. And of course, not to mention, I assume going forward, they're going to need either a combination of machine learning and human moderators and curators, which, to go through that stuff. I mean, that is still the process that you deal with when you want to put anything in the App Store. Case in point, or even on iTunes, case in point, our very podcast that had to get approval to be on iTunes.
Right. And to Apple's credit, I mean, they have always, the one thing that I think they've consistently done and they've consistently really demonstrated is their ability to make sure that what they allow on the App Store is secure. It's not going to hurt you. And, it gives people a lot of peace of mind. So,
yeah,
to their credit, I get it.
Yeah, they've won that argument as far as I'm concerned. Like, even because I have an iOS device and I have an Android device. Like, when I go to the Google Play Store, I still have that slight apprehension about when I download an app, right? Slight.
Yep.
Where Apple, I don't really worry about it, right? And so, like,
Right.
they built that mind share, at least even in me, who I'm a hardcore Android guy, who can appreciate some of what iOS offers, particularly when it comes to Apple TV. So yeah, I agree. I think I don't like you, Apple, but I think you were wronged on this, and I think this decision is terrible.
I think they were.
All right.
I will never buy an Apple device, but whatever.
yeah, right. And here's the deal: like,
That's just me.
I'm that guy that like hates Google and hates YouTube and hates what they do when it comes to free speech and stuff like that. But like, I still use Google products. I still use YouTube. And
it's about finding that middle ground, right?
Yeah. I still like it. I'm still, if that makes me evil, it makes me evil. Any other closing thoughts? Any other kind of stories you'd want to squeeze in before we call it a day?
Nah, honestly, my week has been so busy. As everybody knows, we didn't record last week. Just a lot of stuff going on with life, end of school, and that sort of thing. So I've been a little bit lean on my research and watching stuff other than, handling my own life. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that right now and just, have a beverage later today.
Oh yeah, definitely. Still a couple more chores around the house to take care of. Still a couple more things I need to do around the town. But yeah, I'm going to call it a week myself. Thank you guys for having logged in to Thank You for Your Servers. Again, my name was Thaddeus Preston, aka Nick Way. I am at Nick Way on Twitter. And my brother from another mother, Gary Guthrie. No Twitter yet, bro? No Twitter? Not yet?
I still haven't figured that out. So,
God, your boomer is showing, man. Jeez.
I know.
Where's your MAGA hat,
I know.
Man?
I know. I need a big flag on my car or something. I don't know.
All right, ladies and gents, that has been another edition of Thank You for Your Servers. Signing off.